White. A blank page or canvas.
Welcome to The Little Things You Hear Together, where we dive deep into Broadway cast albums to figure out why some hit harder than others. I'm Alex Asp, and my guest today is my dear, dear friend, Tony Tipton. Welcome.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me, and thank you so much for your preparation to support your guests. And I just have to say how proud I am of you for this show. It's really incredible, and you must be proud of yourself.
Well, thank you. So, you and I have known each other quite a long time. We met each other through the Men's League Club at Ohio State, so we have a musical background as well. So it only felt natural to have you as a guest to talk about a show that has a lot of complex musical themes and motifs because it's a Sondheim show. So I'm so glad that you're here for this.
Thank you. Me too. It's a real honor.
So this is one of we're in the later period of Sondheim's career of big shows, his first collaboration with James Lapine. And, this is a revival. This is the second revival on Broadway of the show. First, the original was 1984, and it had a revival in London in 2006 that came to Broadway in 2008. And now here we are. This started as a New York City Center gala performance that was popular and went on to be a limited run on Broadway. So what is your history with Sondheim Park with George, this album specifically?
I remember vividly my introduction to Sondheim was when Firestone High School in Akron performed Into the Woods. And it was around 2003, I think. And the idea that where a typical story would end, it was just intermission, blew my mind as a young student. From there, around the time that we met, the iconic Ohio State Men's Glee Club 125th anniversary celebration had Michael Martin's arrangement of Send in the Clowns on it. And so I was introduced to that melody. And I can remember watching the movie version of Sweeney Todd in the P space with you and Rachel, and just kind of how formative that was. When it comes to Sunday in the Park in particular, I had downloaded Bernadette's Sondheim, etc., which featured Moved On. And then in October 2013 at Short North Stage, Sarna Lapine actually directed Sunday in the Park. And I saw that with Brenda Leary, and it made such an impression on me, and I've loved the show ever since.
Okay, and then did you ever listen to this Broadway Revival Cast album, or is that more just in preparation for the podcast?
In preparation for the podcast, I turned my attention to this recording.
Okay. Yeah, I don't know when this show entered my life a long time ago, but I think it's one of the ones that I originally found in the library when I was diving into musicals full steam ahead. And this revival, I think I listened to a few years ago. I remember vaguely hearing about the revival at the time and the stunt casting supposedly of Jake Gyllenhaal as George. Although he turned out to actually do a pretty good job, I remember it was controversial that this Hollywood actor was coming in to play such an iconic role. But I think this is obviously a very good show. It won the Pulitzer Prize for drama, but there's a lot to unpack in this with the relationship to Sondheim as an artist himself, the musical storytelling, which I'm always a fan of, but this is one of the best that's out there, with so much of the music being based around imitating the pointillist style of Seurat in the music accompaniment, which is just brilliant. So I think this show is kind of controversial for some people, where they feel it's a little too intellectual and at arm's length, and others are obsessed and love it and feel like this is the most personal thing in the world, which is fascinating. The show can have such different reactions from people. But I'm a big fan of this. The big question that a lot of people will debate is, should this show have the second act? And I see where they're coming from, but I think it's an entirely different show if you only have Act 1. Because all of Act 1 is really setting up what the show is about for Act 2, which is interesting because Act 1 is still very entertaining and moving on its own, but it doesn't have the same impact without Act 2, in my opinion.
Yeah. One of the themes of the show, to me, is seeing both sides of forever. Maybe with Into the Woods, it's you see both sides of happily ever after. And with this show, one of the key words, forever. And when we kind of romanticize love, that's the goal. You want to find something that lasts forever. But then I think it's kind of best exemplified in It's Hot Up Here. Sometimes you're stuck with the same person forever. And it shows another side of it. And so I love that kind of theme of time. And to me, the necessity of the second act is to show that for an artist, someone who's seeing life through this unique lens, that experience, that kind of both sides of having discerning eyes has been universal, going on, forever since the beginning. And I liked that 1984 George was experiencing some of the same things that original George was in the park. And so that's what I think makes it necessary to kind of drive that theme.
Yeah. And it also makes it more relevant that, like you said, this is not a concept that was only relevant for Seurat in the 19th century. It's been a constant struggle for much longer before him and continues to be in the present day. And so I think linking those two together helps to increase the universality of the message, that it's not just a period piece, it is a broader statement on life and humanity.
Absolutely. And there is, to your other point, there is a certain irony of like listening to a song like No Life, by Yvonne and Jules, and in the same moment thinking like, I wish Stephen Sondheim would have done something different here, like that's another kind of point of inception of this whole show and being a part of this episode is I'm like, oh man, I'm the bad guy if I'm trying to give something a score here.
Yeah, well, I think part of what's interesting about Sondheim, with us being lucky to have the Finishing the Hat and Look, I Made a Hat books to hear his thoughts about things, he does a good job of explaining his process, and a show is never done, it's just abandoned. So there will always be things that any composer would like to go back and change potentially. And some do. Every time it's redone, they tinker with it, which I think is often to the detriment of the show. But no one is perfect, even the great Stephen Sondheim. So there will always be things to talk about, and he probably would agree that there are things that he would change if he could. But that's just the nature of art, I guess, and artists. Well, should we just dive right in?
Absolutely.
Composition. Tension.
All right, so the first track is Opening, which is interesting that this is separated out into its own track versus in the OBC, this is just part of Sunday in the Park with George. I'm not sure how I feel about having it as its own track. It's kind of strange to have this separate thing before the first song.
Yeah, I think this was, for me, I like that they are split. But I did have a gripe in flow and cohesion, basically thinking that the track should have switched after harmony and then begin track 2 with Dot's line, which flows into the next song. So I do like the split, and I just think it was in the wrong place.
Yeah, I agree that some of what I'm trying to think of where harmony is in Sunday in the Park with George. Like you would have put the split a little bit later.
I would have put the split a little bit earlier. As it stands now, yeah, where George speaks and he says harmony, and then Dot starts speaking asking, what all he's looking at. And then the track switches and Dot sings A Trickle of Sweat. So I just think it made more sense to me to keep all of Dot's dialogue together.
Yeah. For me, I just think I would start the next track with when we first get the dun dun music rather than the there's a music style change between the two tracks that is not cleanly represented on where the tracks actually split. So that's what I would change. But I do appreciate getting this music with the opening. We get the French horn being back in the mix after the orchestrations I do not like from the 2006 recording that was very pared down. So thank you, Michael Starobin, for reinstating that here.
Exactly.
Basically almost all of the 2000s Sondheim revivals have these pared down orchestras that I just will never want to listen to. And that was true for Company and Sweeney Todd with the John Doyle of it all, but also A Little Night Music. This, the London revival, it was just cheaper, I guess, in the style, but it means that I will never gravitate toward those ones, except for Assassins, really.
Well, I agree with you about just the kind of the sonorous nature of it all. The hero is Michael Starobin, and I love the kind of rhapsodic piano motives. And the other thing that I noticed kind of moving through the orchestration of this show is that you have like really acoustic things to kind of show you where we are, a lot of like the strings, and then you have that like harpsichord sound and a lot of metallic sounds, which I think kind of represent the 80s in the future.
Yeah.
And the opening puts both of those together.
Mm-hmm.
And harmony.
Yeah, I mean, I guess we've kind of been talking already about the next track, Sunday in the Park with George, because they do somewhat blend together. But yeah, I think as we get through the very sweeping opening into the kind of introduction of the pointillism in the music, it's a nice contrast to get us into the world as we are hearing Dot complaining about how she has to stand in the sun and not move while George gets to sit and paint in the shade or sketch in the shade.
The collar is damp, beginning to pinch. The bustle slipping, I won't budge 1 inch. Who is at the zoo, George? Who is at the zoo? The monkeys and who, George? The monkeys and who?
Don't move!
I think Annalee Ashford is always a very funny actress, and we just get that right away from her way of doing the hello George. She's just always gonna be that quirky funny, which maybe makes her not the most versatile actress of all time, but she does still do a lot of emoting through this show. It's not all gimmicky comic stuff, but I really like her voice in general, and it's always nice to have a recording with her.
Yes, and I really one of my takeaways from listening to this is that I think she kind of teaches a master class in handling those quick Sondheim 16th note runs, that it is so difficult to balance, being kind of rhythmically buoyant and on, not getting behind, with fully delivering the text and creating a line. And different cast members throughout this show and other shows really struggle to do that, but I took note of how well she does it.
Well, there are worse things than staring at the water on a Sunday. There are worse things than staring at the water as you're posing for a picture being painted by your lover in the middle of the summer on an island in the river on a Sunday.
I was really, really impressed by that. And she has one of the most comedic moments, I think, and I'm glad that it happens early, when she sings the closed mouth George at the end of the song.
Yeah, which is, it's interesting to hear different singers, whether that's actors on cast albums or people doing this in a cabaret type setting, how much they lean into that closed mouth scream effect of it versus just having it sound pretty. And I do always appreciate when somebody leans into it like she does to fully go,
Yeah.
it really starts completely closed off, which is nice.
Yeah.
I did mention before, like the storytelling through the music with the pointillism. I think it's also very interesting and smart that when Dot goes into her daydream, it becomes more legato, much less of that George type of style, which is, even if you don't know what you're listening to, you know that something's different by how it sounds. And obviously on stage, you see that she has left the real world and is dancing around in her mind. But you don't need that to know that something's different, which is great from a cast album standpoint, but also just brilliant in the show writing.
I agree.
All it has to be is good. And George, you're good. You're really good. George's stroke is tender. George's touch is pure.
And my only qualm in the opening was a textual thing where she's saying, "I love your size, George."
Mm-hmm.
And I can remember like thinking, okay, all right, girl, you've got it. And then I make it over to SIGHS. And I think, all right, okay, let's keep it moving.
I hadn't thought about it as that kind of size. I just assumed it
Yeah.
was a dick joke.
No,
Ugh.
I don't think so.
Well, fine. Okay. Take that away from me.
Yeah.
I really like that in the music in the background, there are random weird notes that sound almost as if they're mistakes in the accompaniment, but they're consistent, so they're not. But it really adds to the texture of the music in the same way that adding certain dots of color in the painting would change how you perceive it. And if you're super zoomed in, it may seem like that can't be right. But if you take the bigger picture, it all works out and you're like, oh yeah, that's exactly how it's supposed to be. So even stuff like that, to really compare the music to the painting that it's, that the show is about, is just so, that attention to detail is what I love the most. And that's why I'm picky for a lot of shows, because I know that it can be done.
That's such a great observation. And like life is still going on around these two characters. There's still a lot that can't be predicted for them.
Yeah. So this song is all about Dot complaining about how she's being the model for George. And at the end of the song, you get that closed mouth put into the open George.
On a Sunday in the park with
Don't move the mouth.
And then we transition into No Life, which is Jules and Yvonne commenting on a painting of George's that I think it's still in that pointillist style, but it's a much smaller painting. And there was originally a song here about the people in the painting before it came to life, and it just served no purpose, so they cut it. But I think it's better to just get on with it. And again, we get wonderful French horn sound to open the song. Always love that.
Ah!
Oh!
Oh! My!
Oh, dear.
Oh!
Oh, my dear.
It has no presence,
No passion.
no life.
And the other kind of interesting casting for this show is Robert Sean Leonard as Jules, because he is much more known from TV and movies. A lot of people probably know him from House. And for whatever reason, my mind always goes back to Much Ado About Nothing. I think that's when I first knew of him as an actor, so that's always what I think of. But he does a fine job as Jules, and another unexpected presence in the cast.
I certainly appreciated it.
Yeah, and Aaron Davey is phenomenal, and Yvonne doesn't get a whole lot to do, but Aaron Davey makes the most of it. And this song is just them shitting on George and pretending to be, so erudite and they know things, but they're just looking for ways to take digs at him. And it's kind of a competition of who can be the meanest and the most clever about it.
Well, you got a little bit of Sondheim humor where they think it's quite boring. A picture of boys with their clothes off.
It's
I
so
appreciated it.
so undignified. But we do get, lots of good Sondheim lyricism.
It's so mechanical.
Up, methodical.
It might be in some dreary socialistic periodical.
Good.
And it says so much about the two of them that after she says that, he's like, good. He's complimenting her on the cleverness of her dig. So you know that they're just trying to do this for each other, not out of any good faith, really.
And my notes were just about the really virtuosic singing. And I thought they kept it really in tune and great clarity. And like those lines really kind of sweep and leap, and it's difficult to tell a story. But those two did a great job.
Yeah, it's definitely a tricky melody in this song in spots to kind of highlight how unnatural what they're saying is, because they're looking for things to criticize. So it goes along with that, but it definitely is not easy to sing. So good on them. I do also love when Yvonne accidentally says something nice or at least neutral about George and calling him young. And then Jules is like, huh? But getting on. Okay. We have to throw in that little dig still to make sure we're not getting too nice. And this is a pretty quick song, but it's nice to kind of set up the world that Jules and George exist in together, both as artists, and they're not the same. So we'll get more of that as we go through. And a lot of that will be in book scenes that we don't get on the album, but there's still bits of it here and there. The next track then is Color and Light. And this is a much longer, includes a lot of back and forth dialogue and singing, which is a very common Sondheim thing, especially once he started collaborating with James Lapine. They really worked well together to create those situations where they flow in and out of each other so naturally. We, in general, I think on this album get more dialogue than other albums of this, the other two cast albums. And like in the opening, we get Dot giving us spoken lines over that kind of da 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 da, like a painting theme.
George likes to be alone. Sometimes he will work all night long painting. We fought about that. I need sleep. I love to dream. George doesn't need as much sleep as everyone else.
On the one hand, it's nice to get more context for things with added dialogue, but sometimes, I don't know, what do you think about the amount of spoken word, especially before a song, that is included in this album?
Great question. And I think it's necessary to follow a lot of what's happening. As far as storytelling, and that's like one of the points for when we talk about theatricality later, because the way the story weaves in and out, I think a lot of that dialogue is necessary. And I'm glad that they kept it in this case. And especially in the second act, it becomes difficult to tell who's who, first of all. And then also most of the characters are doubled in some regard. So in my mind, when the story's doing that, the more dialogue, the better.
Yeah, absolutely. It's really cool to me to watch whether you're watching the bootleg of this production or the great performances broadcast of the original, you can see there's definitely very close attention to what lines get included and which lines do not. Because it's not like there's a chunk of dialogue that's included and then a chunk that's skipped over. It's, we're going to pull this one line for the album, leave out the next two, pull the next two. It's very much picking out little bits here and there to give that narrative as best they can without including everything and not including extraneous speech that's not going to be necessary, since there's obviously limited space on an album and also limited attention span for dialogue when you can't see the show. So I think they do a good job at that. But it's very fascinating to compare, like if you had it written out in front of you, which lines from the show are included in the album and which aren't. It's just again, I love that they cared enough to be that particular and not just, take this section of dialogue and that'll be fine.
Color and light. There's only color and light. Yellow and white. Just blue and yellow and white. Look at the air, miss. See what I mean.
So this song is our first chance to really get Jake Gyllenhaal singing, and he gets his chance to shine. And he is painting while Dot is getting ready for the Follies. And so while he is using that da-da-da-da motion for painting, Dot is using that to powder her face, and it's, visually very cool to get the two different interpretations of that theme. But on the album, we don't get that, obviously, but it does still relate to both of them. It's not only George that has this theme. And once again, Dot goes into a daydream. That seems to be her thing. She's working on being able to concentrate better, but she goes into what if she was in the Follies. And again, as she goes into her daydream, it's less staccato and more legato, which is continuing that same storytelling element from before, which I love.
If my legs were longer, if my bust was smaller, if my hands were graceful, if my waist was thinner.
I do also appreciate, once she gets to the Follies section, the music really becomes like a pastiche of a can-can dance, which is fun because that's what she would have been having in her mind in 18th century or 19th century France. So I think it's just the beat and the dun, 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 dun. It has that feel to it, which I love.
Yes.
I'd be in the Follies, I'd be in a cabaret. Gentlemen in tall silk hats and linen spats would wait with flowers. I could make them wait for hours.
And I am so impressed by Jake Gyllenhaal. He definitely has chops. And my thought while listening to this was just like a little bit rushed and a little bit clipped in this case. And kind of when we talked before about how Annalee Ashford handles those 16th notes and those quick little moments, it's as if to me someone, told Jake, like, whatever you do, don't get behind. And then he kind of overcompensated a little bit.
Yeah.
And so I get most of it, but it just felt a little bit rushed, and some things that could have been more tenuto were a little bit clipped to me.
Yeah, and I wonder, this is entirely speculation, I'm not sure if I've ever heard like how much Jake Gyllenhaal is into musical theater as a whole, but in general, this album, the tempos are slower than the original. And I wonder if he is a fan and knew the OBC album very well, it would feel like it would be very natural to rush a little bit because it feels like that. Like you're used to I can sing these lines at this tempo, I'm used to this tempo, and to slow it down makes it harder. And so he's trying to slow it down, but it's still going a little bit fast. I don't know. That might be entirely wrong, but I do notice some songs more than others that they go slower than other versions. So maybe that's factoring into it.
Yeah.
As we're going back and forth between Dot getting ready for the Follies and George continuing to paint, we get Annalee doing some great line delivery when she kind of is ending her excited Folly sequence.
If I was a folly girl, nah, I wouldn't like it much. Married men and stupid boys and too much smoke and all that noise and all that color and light.
And Bernadette does a very different read on that than Annalee does. And I really love how kind of crushing Annalee's line is, because you can really hear in it that she's lying to herself and she's trying to convince herself that she wouldn't like it so that it's not so painful that she doesn't have it and doesn't go for it. Whereas Bernadette seems to actually believe it more. Anna Lee is not buying it, her own story.
And that is such great character development because, that's a theme for Dot, is this kind of, I'm not going to gripe too much about when I need to move on,
Yeah. There's a line reading though from Anna Lee that I'm not as clear on. So at the end of the song, Dot is like, "Aren't you going to get ready?" And George asks why. And Dot's response is, "The follies, George." And I think there's lots of different ways to deliver that line. Bernadette's was much more kind of ice cold rage in that. And Anna Lee, I think it's going for more kind of sadness, and like, "The follies, George." But she doesn't take it quite as far as she does in a lot of other spots. So it's not to me quite as clear what her intention is in that spot. But yeah. But then watching the bootleg, it does feel a little bit more complex and interesting. So maybe that was just the way this line came out on this day when they were recording.
Yeah, I think she's rooting for him. I really do, and there's an authenticity there.
Yeah, because there's, Dot definitely believes in George's work and believes in George as a person. And that's why she's frustrated, because she believes that he can do it. And why won't you do it for me? And Anna Lee does a very good job at that kind of longing. I mean, she does it again in Sweeney Todd as Mrs. Lovett, in love with Sweeney, who does not love her back. So she's kind of a natural for that type of a role, because she definitely can walk that line of, I'm positive and optimistic, but then reality sets in and I have to deal with that part too.
Yeah.
The next track is Gossip, and so this, along with the following two tracks, are all lumped together in the OBC, and I think it makes sense for them to be separated. So I do like that.
Me too.
Especially Gossip is very distinct from the others. The Dog Song and The Day Off, I think, could still be together fine, because it's the same melody, but Gossip is very different. And I like that we have the different characters all talking about George or about whatever. And one of them is Ashley Park as Celeste number 1. And it's so interesting to me how different her voice sounds in this compared to like Mean Girls. She definitely has the range to modify her voice for the role that she's in, which is always a good thing to be able to do.
Yeah, really versatile.
They say that George has another woman. I'm not surprised. They say that George only lives with tramps. I'm not surprised.
As I was listening, there was one time where I totally didn't get it. So like a little bit of a lyric quiz. The old lady saying, "That man is famous," and then "that man is
filthy."
Yes, very good. And like when I was listening to this recording, I couldn't remember what the lyric was, and I had to like look it up. So there was, yeah.
So it's
So
not
I
as
think
clear.
that was, I kind of lumped that into like virtuosity performance, but there was something lost there when you go back and listen to it.
I'll have to pay attention to that more. But I do like that she's just giving her thoughts on everything and no holds barred. She doesn't give a shit what anybody thinks. Just she's over it all, which is so funny.
Those girls are noisy.
Yes, madame.
That man is famous.
Yes, madame.
That man is filthy.
Your son seems to find him interesting.
That man's deluded.
Artists are so crazy.
Artists are so peculiar.
And my thought listening, to Gossip is, it's 1884, it's France. Did most people really not, get artists and art? What is happening?
I mean, I have no idea really, but a lot of artists are never appreciated in their own lifetime. And as they say in dialogue that's not on the cast album at the beginning of Act 2, Sarah never sold a painting in his life. So
Right.
I think there's probably quite a divide in how people viewed art and artists at the time.
Hmm.
So Gossip isn't very long, and then we go into
Mm-mm.
the dog song, which
Yeah.
is George sketching two different dogs and having two different voices for each of them. And Jake Gyllenhaal is going for it. He is not holding back, and that's what you need for this, so it's really funny. And for whatever reason, lyrics from this song are the ones that were stuck in my head this morning when I woke up. I don't know why the in the crackpot in the bow wow rough. It's just
Yes.
they're funny, weird lyrics, which are a good Sondheim staple. And then
Hmm.
Jake Gyllenhaal's barking is fun, and in the one spot he goes for a bow wow. It's a much goofier bark than Mandy Patinkin did, and much goofier than David Evans did in the '06 recording. So I like that he was just making it his own.
Yes, absolutely.
With the fish and scum and planks and ballast, the nose gets numb and the paws get calloused. And with splinters in your ass, you look forward to the grass on Sunday. The day off.
And it gave us I think from a character perspective, showed us a lot of George's eccentricity, and kind of helped drive home what we had just heard, in Gossip. Like, there's definitely something going on there. Like, he's definitely an artist, as it were. And then when he is one of the dogs, Spot, he's like, we get a Sondheim lyric, that's the puddle where the poodle did the piddle.
Yes.
And that was something that just makes me smile every time.
I mean, the rhyming and the alliteration together, it's just funny. And the subject matter all together make for a great lyric.
What's the muddle in the middle?
That's the puddle where the poodle did the piddle.
So as we're going through this, he is just expressing himself through the dogs as he's sketching. And then it really goes smoothly into The Day Off, which is a lot of the same lyrics, same structure of the song. And now we're focusing more on the people in the park again, and George observing them and sketching them. And I really like the way that Sondheim and Lapine set it up, where at the beginning of each new person, George is singing with them for the first line to set up that this is what he thinks that they're saying, and what he's making all of this up for them, because for the most part he's observing them from a distance and not getting to know them, because that's not his style. So he will start the line with the character, and then that character will continue running with it, which I like that way of bridging. This is not necessarily fact. This is all through George's eyes that we're seeing this.
Second bottle, as she looks for me.
He is bursting to go.
Near the fountain,
I could let him.
how to manage it.
No.
No, I didn't realize, and that is so smart and helps the audience too, I do think.
Yeah. And it's also accomplishing not making it feel like a list of, okay, well, we have to get this character to sing, we have to get this character to sing, because then the audience can kind of groan, as he talks about in the book. So this is also a way of combining different characters together and getting a much more organic feeling way of exploring these characters, which is appreciated. I think the nurse is so funny to me, that she's apparently just doing this so that she can have a break from taking care of her own mother.
Mothers may drone, mothers may whine, tending to his though is perfectly fine. It pays for the nurse that is tending to mine. On Sunday, my day off.
Like, that's
I'm
just funny. Like,
Sure, it gets a laugh.
I need a break from my mom, so I'll take care of somebody else's mom for a day. Okay.
It's very real.
Very real.
And I'll tell you what, like working in a school, I hear that about my own children every once in a while.
I bet. So the nurse is fun. Then we get Franz and Frida, who are servants of Jules, and they're funny. I use the phrase "I was never intended for work" pretty often, and no one ever gets it. But I too feel that I was never intended for work. It's very relatable.
Well, I'll get it from now on. And as we move through the show, some of the questions that I have, we'll talk more later, but are about kind of the accents and the diction. And I'll tell you what, it's like once again hearing like silverware and for then we rush, wash, brush, wipe, and wax. When Franz is saying that in his accent, I had no idea what was going on.
For them we rush, wash und brush, wipe und wax. Franz, relax! Weil he creates, wie scrape zerplates, und das zerknick knacks hundreds to the shelf. Work is what you do for others, Liebchen. Art is what you do for yourself.
And I think that's true of every recording of this song. It's just, it goes by so quickly that with that accent, it's really hard to pick out words.
Yeah. And I had another question about the boatman. He sings kind of, there's a line about like one eye, no illusion that you get with two. And I can't see a good photo of Philip Boykin, but did he have an eye patch in the show?
Yeah, I think so.
He did.
I'm pretty
Okay.
sure.
Okay. Because that's like it seemed key in the earlier versions, and then I couldn't see his eye patch in the images that I saw. But he is just such a key figure in this song, and makes a few plays, one eye for what is true and one for what suits you are the eyes of the artist. And then he says, draw your own conclusions, all you artists do.
Yeah. That role is interesting. Like it hits different with Philip Boykin singing it because he sings it better than other versions. So it kind of, you realize what he's saying more and like, oh, he's just got his tinfoil hat on and he's going off on everybody and everything. And it's like, on the one hand, he's kind of right about a lot of things, but he's also very cynical, but maybe that's also correct. But I don't know. He's funny as the boatman, and he hits that low note in Where Society's Faults that is beautiful.
Yeah.
Draw your own conclusion, all you artists do. I see what is true. Sitting there looking everyone up and down, studying every move like you see something different, like your eyes know more. You and me, pal, we're society's fault.
And the last line of this song, the ensemble sings where green and blue blind you. And I just kind of wonder, like, blind you from the rest of life, the dredge, the taking care,
Yeah. Yeah, I think that is left open to interpretation, but that kind of seems, I like that version of it where I would say more optimistically look at it as it blinds you to the problems of life and you can focus on this beautiful thing. But I'm sure there are more dark takes that you could get as well.
Yeah.
Also, I do want to make sure to shout out Claiborne Elder, who is the soldier and sounds fantastic, of course, as he always does.
Ladies, I and my friend trust we will not offend, which we'd never intend, by suggesting we spend this magnificent Sunday with you and your friend.
I wish he had more to sing in this. I know he's done Sunday as George in different regional productions, so I would love to see him do that. But that's not in this album.
Yeah.
The next track now is Everybody Loves Louie, and this is Dot trying to make George jealous / trying to convince herself that she actually wants Louie. But so it blew my mind a few years ago when I realized that both this album and the original Broadway Cast album have this song after the full day off sequence, when in reality, this song is in the middle of that sequence before the soldier song. And even having
Ooh, I didn't realize either.
Yeah, even having watched the video so many times, they do such a good job of how it's done on the album that it feels natural. And in the show, it feels natural in a different sense. So I just never put those pieces together until I listened to the London Revival Cast, and they have it in the right place, separating out the bits of The Day Off and the Soldier Song. I was like, why did they do that? And then I looked into it more. I was like, oh, that's how it actually is. Shit, I didn't realize. Which is just crazy that that's a big change that you, and I'm sure many other people just didn't catch because it sounds so natural and good.
No, I didn't.
Yeah. So, things we learn.
Everybody loves Louis. Louis simple and kind. Everybody loves Louis. Louis lovable. Seems we never know, do we, who we're going to find. And Louis the baker is not what I had in mind.
So as Dot is going through talking about Louis, some of the lyrics are very straightforward and she's just extolling his virtues, and some are more silly and she's just pulling at strings to try to find something to praise for Louis. But then the bread George,
And then in bed, George, I mean he needs me. I mean like George, George.
It's so funny. I don't know, it might just be me, but I feel like I get the true sense of needs more from Annalie Ashford than I got from Bernadette listening to the original. Like, it took a long time before I realized it was needs with a K for the joke. But it's just, yeah, it is a double play because it's, oh, he actually needs her, unlike George, who needs no one. But the, like, Doe George is the tip-off that I think it's not as clear in the diction what Bernadette is saying. So maybe that's why it's clearer from Annalie.
Yeah, it's one of the best lines in the show, I think. And this song, I'm thinking a lot about emotiveness. And I think you kind of mentioned in the guide about making someone seem like a real person. To me, this just solidifies Dot as real and resonated personally, because I think at different points in my life, I felt like Dot, I felt like George, and I felt like Louis, And so in that way, the way she delivers it felt very organic, and it made the stage disappear for me, as it were. And I mean, who has not felt that, the line,
We lose things, and then we choose things, and there are Louis, and there are Georges. Well, Louis and George.
Yeah.
it just drops you to the floor,
And that's where you know that she's lying to herself, and she in that moment can't lie anymore. She knows that they're not the same. So good.
No.
And it's even more impressive that she does all that while singing this so well, because this is a difficult song to sing, as I've heard people in different settings try. And she hits all the notes and still gets that emotion across, which is not easy to do.
No, it really is incredible, and gives us, these different glimpses of Dot, the person who's in there. And, I really value that, to see that other side of that character.
Mm-hmm. This is one of the songs I feel is the most slowed down compared to the original, which I guess helps to facilitate her hitting all those notes. But I do wish it was a touch faster, because especially at the end, after
Louis has to make his way, and George can only make his. Louis it is!
that bit there, it just feels like it drags on for me because it's at that slower tempo. That's the most noticeable part of the song for me. And I also don't like that they hold on to that long note. I prefer that to be da-da-da-da-da-dum. So I don't, it's not a noticeable thing, but if you're comparing different versions of it, that's not my favorite way to do it. So in the show, then, it goes back to the soldier song, but we already got that earlier in The Day Off. So on the album, we go to Finishing the Hat. And this is, one of the most iconic Sondheim songs. It's what he named his first book of lyrics. And this is, so we saw earlier in Color and Light some of George in the zone and getting, kind of so focused that the rest of the world falls apart, or falls away, I should say. And here he's actually kind of reflecting on that state of being and what it costs him to be that focused on his art. And that's really interesting to get into. He's more aware than we've been led to believe of what he's doing to people.
Yes. And that is quintessentially Sondheim, to show you the other side of the coin.
Finishing the hat. How you have to finish the hat. How you watch the rest of the world from a window while you finish the hat.
And back to that theme of vision, artists have this distinct lens through which they see everything. And, it's a blessing and a curse to be so discerning. And I think Jake Gyllenhaal has the range, but maybe something that day, I just thought some of like the upper kind of belt stuff was a bit pressed.
Yeah.
And it wasn't clear to me whether it was that day or whether it was a choice. But basically, if it was a choice, I probably would have chosen differently.
The choice may have been mistaken. The choosing was not.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Let's stay on this for a little bit.
Yes. I feel like it's more noticeable in a couple other songs in this album. But yes, there are parts where it's like he's pushing, especially in the next song. It's like he's pushing hard to get the power of the power behind the note, but struggling to keep it in tune. So it's kind of like you're riding a bike that's careening down the hill and you're just trying to maintain control. So it's like, technically it's there, but it does not feel stable. It does not feel comfortable. And on the bootleg, which I'm guessing is from later in the run, a lot of those things are smoothed out. So either it was just a thing this day, or he got more comfortable with it as the run went on. But yeah, it's definitely a few of those moments around here.
Yes. And then I want to quickly follow up by saying that most of the song was quite virtuosic.
Yes.
Moving through all those different ranges and registers, and of all the versions, the way he treated the windows, don't cancel me, gays, in falsetto, was really just delightful and very artful. And I was so impressed because that is such a hard line.
Yeah. He's kind of going back and forth throughout all of this of what is worth waiting for, what, the trade-offs you have to make. And I really love the line.
And how you're always turning back too late from the grass or the stick or the dog or the light. How the kind of woman willing to wait's not the kind that you want to find waiting to return you to the night. 'Tis a from the heart, coming from the heart.
It's kind of the Rodney Dangerfield, I wouldn't want to be a member of a club that would have me type of mentality of like,
yes,
the woman who's willing to wait is not the one that you want. And just how lonely that is to realize that he's recognizing that the qualities he would look for in a person will never be in the person that that would be interested in him. So sad.
No, that's such a smart connection. It's such a smart connection, and it is sad. And I think, blessing and curse, both sides of it.
Yeah.
That level of discernment.
Because at the end of the day, look, I made a hat where there never was a hat. So he's going back and forth, but he's still very proud of what he's accomplished. And we can at least assume, based on what we get in the show and the album, that he thinks he made the right choice to focus on the painting and not on Dot. which is,
Right.
if that is the right choice for him, I guess, Dot was able to move on and find Louis. So, things aren't always ideal, and sometimes good enough is what we can get, and that's better than a lot of people get.
Absolutely. Keeping your eye on the prize and the goal at hand, and that level, you can't create people. So when you have a relationship, there's a level of acceptance. And I think George just has a little bit further to go there and is more comfortable in a world that he can create.
Not relatable at all.
Exactly.
Look, I made a hat. Where there never was a hat.
But the cost of all that, then, is the next song, We Do Not Belong Together. George is continuing to work, and Dot has been trying to reach out to him in the show. And this is kind of the culmination of, well, fine, I'm going to be leaving. I thought you'd care, but you don't. And it's just the desperation that you get from Dot that Annalie does sell very well is she's so desperate just to hear anything from him.
Tell me not to go. Tell me that you're hurt. Tell me you're relieved. Tell me that you're bored. Anything. But don't assume I know. Tell me what you feel.
What I feel.
Like, even if it's bad, just tell me what you're feeling, because I need something. I can't go on just with a stone statue who's not speaking to me.
Yeah. And like musically, you start to hear some of the motives that are going to come back in Move On. And so to me, that kind of foreshadows and creates even more of a feeling of ultimatum, like once you go back and listen to it. And this song is just vocal gymnastics. And there, in the take that made it onto the album, there's some times where I think they're searching a bit, but then, and like I started to write a critique about it. And then when I actually flipped open and looked at the score, I just shut my mouth and actually turned it, underlined vocal gymnastics, because it's really amazing the singing that they're able to do. There was one moment where Jake has a lyric thought you were a part of.
That's the big one that I was talking about before. It's so pressed.
Yes, and it just I wanted to be in the room for that conversation where they were like, okay, you're gonna sing it like Potov, and it just caught my ear as I didn't understand what they were going for.
Yeah, and that it's like he starts off with so much pushing to get the power through that the note's not in tune, and then he adjusts to get it back into tune, but it's not the best tone. And it's really only in a certain range of his voice when he's pushing hard. When he's emphasizing higher than that or lower than that, it's not a problem. But it's just kind of a very specific, however many notes that are really tough for him, apparently, to get that power without losing control.
There's nothing to say. I cannot be what you want.
What do you want,
I needed
George?
you and you left.
There was no room
You will
for
not
me.
accept who I am. I am what I do, which you knew, which you always knew, which I thought you were a part of.
No.
And like I said, in the bootleg that you can see on YouTube, at least, that issue is not there. So either this was just a one-off, or it was something that he was able to work on and improve, which is always good too.
Good. Right. And like I said, overall, don't cancel me. I really am impressed by Jake Gyllenhaal, and I think that he is aware of what's happening. But ultimately, one of the fascinating things about this series and about what you do is that there's one take, that makes it onto the album.
Yeah.
And
there are a lot of times where
cool.
If you sing it completely in tune and pretty, it's going to lack any emotional meaning. And
absolutely,
in general, throughout Broadway history, most of the icons that people remember, it's not for their perfect voices. It's for how much they brought the emotion and the acting to the character, and they could sing. So the acting definitely often should come first. And it's just,
Yes.
at this point, we've gotten so used to a certain standard of people like, oh, well, you have to be able to do both perfectly. It's like, well, sometimes it's worth a little bit of a trade-off to get the acting come through more than the perfect note.
No. At the end of the day, one of us is singing on Broadway, and it's not me. But I do want to I do want to have something to contribute to the podcast.
Oh, yes. And that's why we talk about these
and
things.
the-
And it's, I always feel like conversations like this help to really appreciate when something is spectacular, because it's
Yeah.
not empty praise that we're giving. It's like, no, we're going to realistically evaluate what's going on and how it makes us feel. And if I have no notes, that's saying something, because
Yeah.
I'm a petty
And-
bitch.
Right. The final thing that came to mind as I was listening was the choice of these R's at the end of together. And sometimes they almost felt like a parody, like a joke. Like I kind of I wrote over the top, but together. And like I said, I just want to be in the room when we're having that conversation.
Yeah, that's always a tough one in situations like this to, well, it's not going to sound natural if you sing together, or, how to
Right.
get the clarity of the word through, but still sounding pretty. And yeah, it's definitely harder than it sounds. And people who have not, sung in voice lessons or in a choir may not understand just how difficult that is to get exactly in that sweet spot. I do love that after so much of the show, with Dot kind of being a little bit of a doormat for George, here she is sticking up for herself.
No one is you, George, there we agree. But others will do, George. No one is you, and no one can be. But no one is me, George. No one is me. We do not belong together, and we'll never belong.
Like, yeah, you're unique and special, but so am I, and I don't deserve to be treated this way. It's like, good for you, Dot. You deserve to be treated well. Even if you're not an artistic genius like George, you still have your own unique value to the world.
Yeah. And there's something for all of us to learn there too.
Mm-hmm. And so she's leaving without George to go to America, which then sets up Act 2 later, we'll get to. But next on the album, we have Beautiful. And this definitely has a lot of dialogue at the beginning that's not on the original. And some of it is, I think, really helpful. And some of it just feels like a little bit too much for me. Like, it's not actually giving us more of what's going on. It's just taking up time. So I like that there's more dialogue than the original, but I would still cut it down a little bit if I were making the choices.
Yeah, probably overdid it.
And so this is the big moment for Penny Fuller to shine as the old lady, which I love that that's her role name is Old Lady, even though she's George's mother.
Yeah.
Sundays disappearing all the time when things were beautiful.
And it's funny that this song I did not appreciate for a very long time, because it's not as flashy as others, but it is so beautiful. Literally.
Yeah.
Just the sentiments that are expressed in this. One, you get how memory of, like, I miss that better thing.
Yeah.
Sometimes that better thing is even made up. Like, it's not just you can't go back, but you might be romanticizing something, or, she says at the end, I long for the old view. But in the dialogue leading up, we establish, no, there were never trees there. That was an open field. So another danger of living in the past is it may not even be real, let alone not healthy, because you should be in the present. But I appreciate that more as we got, as time has gone on. And then I love
Pretty isn't beautiful, Mother. Pretty is what changes. What the eye arranges is what is beautiful.
It's not,
Aw.
that's like, I guess it's kind of beauty is in the eye of the beholder, but it's what you make is what's beautiful. Things that are aesthetically pleasing will pass and they will change and your taste will change and all that. But it's what you create. That's what's actually beautiful. It's very sweet.
This is one of the few times where you kind of diverge from that theme of forever, and it feels very ephemeral. Sundays disappearing.
Mm-hmm.
You feel a clock ticking, and then to your point about kind of the subjective nature of beauty, she says you make it beautiful. And I love that. I thought that was one of the most tender moments in the show, because we know that the relationship between, quote unquote, the old lady and George is nothing if not strained and complicated. But yeah, she kind of, at the same time, the listener is hit with this moment of fleeting beauty and this moment between mother and son. You make it beautiful. Oh, Georgie. And I just thought, yeah, Penny Fuller in this way delivered one of the best performances on the album, hands down.
Sundays disappearing as we look. You make it beautiful.
Yeah, I wish this was done more in like cabaret settings. And I don't know why it isn't, because it's a great standalone number. And it's such a beautiful sentiment. Maybe someday.
Yeah.
But instead of someday, we have Sunday as the next track to close out Act 1.
No.
So in the past, I did not like that this song starts with all the cacophony building, because it's like, if it's on shuffle, I just want to hear the song. And sometimes I still feel that way if I want to listen to the song alone. But as part of the album, I really think it's impressive to have that building, all the characters arguing with each other, and the discord that George then pulls out the unity and the harmony.
Remember, George.
Order?
Yeah, and if I'm not mistaken, on the at least on the London Cast album, they included a lot of the dialogue and called it a track called Chaos.
Yeah, they definitely included a lot more dialogue in the London one than any other version.
And that, that helped to kind of set up what's all happening right before the end.
Yeah. And again, with the musical storytelling, that I'll keep bringing up because it's so good. Most of the score, especially around George and the painting, has been pointillism inspired. And now all of a sudden we're getting sustained, beautiful chords. And it's a very different style as all those dots come together, and we're zooming out now to see the painting as a whole. The song is reflecting that as well. So pretty.
Yeah.
By the blue, purple, yellow, red water, on the green, purple, yellow, red grass.
And I love the lyric is one long incomplete sentence, and that was intentional. As Sondheim put it, it would be as if you were reading on the plaque next to the painting in the museum. It's not going to be necessarily a typical sentence or sentiment. It's going to be just kind of describing what's there. And it's amazing how it still feels so deep, even though it's not necessarily saying much of anything. It's just so beautiful.
Well, I'll go back to, I think the brass sound on this whole album is just triumphant. And like the horn players, I think it's like RJ Kelly and David Peel on this album, they're just absolute gangsters. And so when you talk about those motives, like you said, you get those like lush kind of add 9 chords in the beginning, and then that Sunday minor 6th in the horn is just stunning. And I think it serves the purpose of the song to a T.
Yes. This, as often is the case, I don't have a whole lot to say because it's just so wonderful to listen to, and it's just a great way to close Act 1. And I think that's part of why people feel like you should just end the show here, because it's such a great ending. And I'm like, well, we'll get it again at the end of Act 2, and it'll have even more meaning then.
Yeah. I liked, distinct from the, like, even more than some of the other versions, I loved the alignment of the voices. And that's something that I think is so hard to do on Broadway, because you need the voices to be able to do very specific things. And then when they come together in ensemble, the sound is going to be inherently different than a choir that was auditioned to be a choir.
Yeah.
And so for someone with our ears, that becomes difficult sometimes. But I think the sound is really well aligned. And what an interesting choice, to have the a vowel, grass, and path, which, like, I've talked about this at length with other choral artists before, and even Madeline Marshall kind of throws up her hands a little bit in the book about how you treat in the choral setting.
As we pass through arrangements of shadows towards the verticals of
And so this one kind of flows in and out of my taste, to be honest. Sometimes it's a bit stark, but I understand that it's one of the most difficult vowels to sing. And I thought that this album did it the best. And it's just so tough to do with Broadway singers in ensemble.
Any ensemble. Any group of singers.
Any ensemble, any group of singers. And I would, those, and then back, to the ending R's, if you have like 3 or more people, why don't we just let them go?
Yeah. Water.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah. It's definitely, I've realized part of what makes this podcast interesting is how much of my nitpicking is coming from my background with choral singing and things that Robert J. Ward pounded into us through all those years of what's important when singing, especially as a group. It's all on display here, and I am glad that you are here with me to talk about it, since we have that experience together.
Yeah. No, and I'm trying to be very careful to use words like my taste, my sensibility, my ears, with the understanding that it's different for everyone, and that, while many guidebooks have been written, those guidebooks are someone's opinion. So
even Madeline.
Right. Even Madeline.
I really like, so at the end of the song, we get this chord progression that it's almost like Phantom of the Opera, in that it's just this very specific chord progression that repeats and has kind of a thematic purpose. But I really like the duration of these chords. In different versions, sometimes they really hold them out way too long, or they speed through them way too quickly. So I very much appreciate that they have enough length to feel important, but not like we're just languishing in it. So good job, Chris Fenwick, as the music director.
Good job.
And that gets us to intermission. So now we get to It's Hot Up Here to open Act 2. And this pairs well with Sunday in the Park with George at the top of Act 1. And both are complaining about the heat. And that brings up the point that all of the songs in Act 2, to varying degrees, are partners of a song in Act 1, that thematically and musically they will pair up, and again showing these themes are universal and travel forward 100 years and are still applicable. So it's the clever use of themes and motifs rather than lazy reusing like Andrew Lloyd Webber. Sorry, did I say that out loud?
Shots fired. Shots fired.
So we're still in a weird time right now. We're sort of, we're in the present for the 1984 present, but it's all of the characters in the painting, so they're still as they were in Act 1, but now they're complaining about how they've been up on this wall for 100 years. And it's rhyming monotonous with forgottenness and a lot on us is so brilliant. I love it.
I hate this dress. The soldiers have forgotten us.
The boatman schwitzes.
I'm completely out of proportion.
These helmets weigh a lot on us.
This tree is blocking my view.
This is another song that I would take a little bit faster if I had my say, because there's a lot of empty space between the singers and the notes, because we're back to that pointless style. And when it's too slow, it just feels like it's sparse instead of intentional. So that's my one thing with this song, that I just wish it was a tiny bit faster.
I can see that.
There's not a breath of air up here, and they're up here forever. It's not my fault I got up here. I'll rot up here, I am so hot up here.
And like, I thought this showed a lot of personality, and it's like a part of me almost wishes that it occurred earlier, because it really gives you a glimpse into each character's motivation and like what they think is most important. And of course, it's like a little bit of Sondheim humor when Jules criticizes how he's drawn.
Of course, yes.
I love that. And tying back into the theme, of this show and of many Sondheim shows, I think it's really inventive to show the kind of like Joni Mitchell, both sides now of being together for so long.
Yeah.
And it seems like a good thing. And then you're here and you're really living it, and you realize that maybe it's not what you wanted.
Mm-hmm. Very true. At the end of the song, it's repeating the motif from Sunday in the Park with George that Dot sings at the end. And each of the characters gets a line. And it does bother me. The boatman is slightly lagging behind the beat compared to everybody else being more on. And I wish, with how great Philip Boykin's voice is, I wish it was a little bit cleaner on the beat. But the rest are all pretty good.
It.
There are worse things than sweating by a river.
When you're sweating in a picture that was painted by a genius.
And you know that you're immortal.
And you'll always be remembered. Even if they never see you. And you're listening to drivel.
And you're part of your companion.
Your glasses haven't stolen. And you're bored beyond endurance.
And the baby has no
And
diapers.
you're slow chair.
And you are out of all proportion.
And it hates these people.
He's
And
also one of the first ones.
This is another opportunity, for Franz's like accent. And there was one where he says like, at least the brat is with her mother. And I had to look it up. I couldn't remember what it was.
Yeah. And we haven't really talked about it at all, but Ruthie Ann Miles is Frida in this, which is wild that she is. There are so many people in this that are in a relatively small role. Like Brooks Ashmanskas is Mr. and Charles, like people that had been on Broadway and would go on to do much more on Broadway in these tiny roles, because it's such a good show that they were like, yeah, I'm willing to do that. I think it says a lot about the material and Lapine and the whole team to be able to get people to do roles that in other similar situations they might feel were not big enough for their talent. But I love having all that talent in the smaller roles, because those really contribute to the whole picture.
I think so. It comes together so well.
Mm-hmm. And then we have a time jump now to 1984 in the museum where the painting is displayed. And I think it was still the Chicago Museum of Art at that time. I know that's where it is now, but I think that's where it's been pretty much the whole time. So we are now introduced to George, the grandson or great-grandson of George from Act 1. And he is a different kind of artist with his chromolooms, and we get his chromolume number 7 as the next track. And it's interesting. This is kind of like an overture of sorts, I think, where it's just up to the orchestrator to do whatever, because this is entirely different than the chromolume number 7 track on the original, and I think also fairly different from the London version, because it's just different arrangements of themes from the first act with a much more synth aesthetic to it, because we're in the 80s, so of course it's got to be all synth all the time, and it's just his new take on color and light, which is, chromolume fun, that he's, whether it was intentional or just thematic for us as the audience, his machine is using scientific exploration of color and light and how they are interacting with each other to give the art itself, which is not represented on an album that is audio only, unfortunately. So yeah, there's not a whole lot to say about the chromolume. However, the next song, there's a lot to say. Putting It Together, another of the major takeaways from this show that people know. And I think, so we start off with kind of referencing back to gossip as people in the museum are talking about George before we get to his part in a little bit. And so many of these lyrics are brilliant. I can't possibly pull them all out and not just say the whole song. But one that that stands out to me every time is,
it's not enough knowing good from rotten.
You're telling me.
Something new pops up every day.
You're telling me.
It's only new, though for now.
Nouveau.
But yesterday's forgotten.
And tomorrow is already passé.
There's no surprise.
That is the state of the art, my friend. That is the state of the art.
It's coming at you fast, and it's the kind of thing where you can't see anything coming because it's moving too quickly and it's too well done. And it's kind of like a beat later, you realize what they said, and you're like, oh, that's lovely. I love the juxtaposition of all those concepts together in a very Sondheimian way.
It is brilliant.
Ounce by ounce, putting it together, you'll come to lunch. Small amounts, adding up to make a work of art. First of all, you need a good foundation, otherwise it's risky from the start. Takes a little cocktail conversation, but without the proper preparation, having just a vision's no solution. Everything depends on execution. The art of making art is putting it together.
As part of this, we get that George is here with his grandmother, Marie, and Annalie Ashford's southern accent just makes me laugh, which it makes sense.
Okay, so Bernadette was just very subtle with like a little bit of nasality, and a little bit of like kind of taking shallower breaths, which played really well. Like, I think that is like authentically what happens to old people. Jenna Russell introduced this very like subtle southern drawl, which I think played well. Annalie Ashford reminds me of Stephanie Weir as Dot from Mad TV. I don't know if you remember this.
I
but
don't.
If you go and look at these videos, I think you'll understand. And I just think she did a little too much.
The Lomachrome. Yeah, it's a lot. Again, she just leans into that comic place so much, and maybe could have been pulled back a little bit here.
Yeah.
George and I are going back to France next month to visit the island where the painting was made, and George is gonna bring the Lomachrome.
So the different recordings of this song are, again, interesting as far as how much of the dialogue they include and which bits they do include, as well as how much they're layering the dialogue and the singing. Like in the original, there's a lot of times where George is singing and somebody else is talking, and then in this, it's much more separated. So you hear everything more clearly in this version, but it loses a little bit of that kinetic energy of things going on at the same time. But I do really like that they have, right before going into one of the verses, they have George's forced laugh as he is schmoozing and doing the thing that he hates the most, which is trying to get people to support him financially so he can keep doing his art. And I think
Yes.
Jake did a very good job at that. Right into singing. It was so good.
Brilliant. And like this is one of the few times where I've had like a Stephen Sondheim note and go into gay hell, but I just thought like that ba-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da. It must happen 200 times, right?
Yeah.
And I think it was just a bit much.
Okay, that's fair. I think it's interesting. It's not related to that specifically, but as far as the repetition in Look, I Made a Hat, he talks about how there's a lot of words ending in ation or ishin and rhyming all of those.
So you should support the competition. Try to set aside your own ambition, even while you jockey for position. If you feel a sense of coalition, then you'll never really stand alone. If you want your work to reach fruition, what you need's a link with your tradition, and of course a prominent commission.
And again, the attention to detail where he was trying to find the line of repeating it enough times to be interesting and kind of surprising that, oh, you found another one to rhyme, but then switching to a different one, like going from a string of Asian rhymes to a string of Ishin rhymes so that people don't get bored. And he also avoided identities, which is a pet peeve of mine when you rhyme the word with the word itself again. And I think a lot of this shows why there's so much craft in lyric writing, as well as in, composing music, and why I get picky about both. Because if you are paying attention to those things and putting the time in, you can really make a bigger difference in how it holds up. Not just, oh, it was fine to listen to once, but is it something that is both enjoyable to listen to and will last, long enough for people to appreciate everything that's there?
Right. I think my takeaway was like either take it to the B section more often or make the B section longer and then bring it back,
Yeah, very fair. I think so. I mean, the crux of this song is George's mentality of how he wishes he didn't have to beg for money to make his art. And I think it's really well phrased in one of the verses.
Art isn't easy, even when you're hot.
Are these inventions of yours one of a kind?
Advancing art is easy, yes. Financing it is not.
They take a year to make.
A vision's just a vision if it's only in your head.
The minute he finishes one, he starts raising money for the next.
If no one gets to see it, it's as good as dead.
Work.
It has to come to light.
Like, it's true in some sense, if you have an idea but it never is expressed, it's not of any value to anybody else. And does it need to have value to other people? Not necessarily, but it's certainly not very fulfilling if it's only for yourself. And it's just the realities of how you make a living doing what you want to do. So I think the line is walked pretty well throughout the song of George, knowing that he has to do this and he's resigned to that fact, but still doesn't like it.
Yeah, I can certainly see that.
And I love the slip of the tongue when George says a couple different versions of, so that you can go on exhibition, so that your work can go on exhibition. Like, it's so great because I think to some degree, George thinks that he's only doing this for the work and not for himself. But in reality, he is wanting that recognition as well. And I don't think he lets himself admit that, but then it comes, slips through a couple times, which is smart to give us more insight into the character very quickly and easily.
Yes.
And that is the state of the art.
So, after this whole scene song, we go to Children and Art, and this is very pretty. It's very simple in the best way of using simplicity, both melodically and thematically. It's just gentle. It's Marie as an old woman thinking, she wouldn't be thinking at the same breakneck pace as her younger self. So having the lyrics be slower, having things be a little bit more distilled makes a lot of sense for the character.
It includes some of my favorite singing in the show, and like Annalie Ashford really delivers. Like there's like that kind of virtuosic ascending minor third no one had done, you know, that she hits right on every time. And then that big fall on like, I'm just quoting mama.
Yes.
And no, and that just has to take it out of you. And
So low.
she did it so well on the album takes.
He should be happy. Mama, he's blue. What do I do?
And then I think this is my favorite lyric in the show. The child is so sweet, the girls are so rapturous. Isn't it lovely how artists can capture us?
Mm-hmm. That's very good.
And I loved it.
Yeah. I really like that Marie gets what George was going for in the painting when he was saying to Dot before, I care about this painting, you will be in this painting. And that was his way of trying to say, that's how I care about you. And Marie gets that.
Yeah.
Isn't she beautiful? There she is, there she is, there she is, there she is. Mama was everywhere. He must have loved her so much.
Like she understands that that's how he was able to express himself. And it's kind of that vindication 100 years later that George may not be good at expressing himself, Act 1 George, but he did have feelings.
Yeah. And there's something to be said for love languages, people who understand each other.
Mm-hmm. And I also, near the end, I really like the sentiment of,
Mama said, honey, mustn't be blue. It's not so much do what you like as it is that you like what you do.
Which is a good mentality if you're in a situation that is not ideal. If you can try to find something that you like about it, whatever job you have at the time, that can just help to make it more bearable. And it doesn't always have to be about finding your dream, but just being able to be happy with the moment and where you are.
It is quite the life lesson.
Mm-hmm. Is it lesson number 8?
Maybe.
Well, that's the next track. And so this is now, we are in Paris. George has traveled there to revisit the island. And we get hints at it through this song, but in the show it's more explicitly stated that that Marie has died. She did not make it to accompany him on this trip as planned. And so he has her little primer book and he's reading from it. And I really like at the beginning of the song, he's reading very simple phrases and they're spaced apart as he reads from the book. And in this version of the album, we don't get that this book existed before, but in the London recording, it is referenced that she's learning to read in Act 1.
Yeah.
But here he's reading these, and to me, I've always kind of taken that as he's reading slowly and having spaces because he's translating the French as he's reading, because Dot would have been writing in French, not English. And I don't know if that's true or if that's just what I made up.
Yeah. I could see it. I took it as like reading and pausing, like reflecting.
Yeah.
But I'll think more about what you said for sure.
And yeah, as we go through, it starts off with Charles has the ball, Marie has the ball of Charles. Like he's reading, and then there's a point where it references Marie, because this is where his grandmother got her name. Dot was inspired by this book, presumably. And then he starts transitioning into similar types of sentences, but about his own life. And then it gets more complicated as he goes along. And I think it's really, you get that stylistic change when he switches over into himself, not just reading.
Charles misses his ball. George misses Marie. George misses a lot. George is alone.
And I wish the title of the song was more descriptive, I guess, because it's not a very interesting title, but it's such a beautiful song.
Yeah. And you get the play on what he misses. He misses Dot, he misses a lot. And that, I think for both Georges, it's like that's the lesson, maybe.
Yeah.
It's not just a reading lesson. It's about what you lose in your unbreakable concentration, and kind of a reminder for each of them.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. There's a spot later on in the song that's the other big noticeable one for me of trying to push that note a little too hard and it's not quite right. But overall, he does sound very lovely in this song as well, because this is really quite the chance to emote and act through the song, which is luckily an opportunity that he takes.
Stretching his vision in every direction. See George attempting to see a connection, when all he can see is maybe a tree, the family tree. Sorry, Marie.
Yeah, it's like the lilt of it all is very reminiscent of like Agony from Into the Woods. I think of this as like that, and I guess it's apt that it's called Agony, but this is like the agony of Sunday in the Park with George.
Less funny though, but musically, yes.
Yes.
And now we go into Move On as the next track. And this is the best spot where I really appreciate the added dialogue to set up the song. I think this is where it's the most valuable that they added it, because it makes it so much clearer that this is Dot that he is experiencing coming back to life as he's kind of conjured her from reading through her lesson book. And on other versions, it's not as clear that this is Dot versus Marie. It would also be clearer here, even without the dialogue, because of the exaggerated Southern accent for Marie. But it's, I think, very well done to give us more insight, but not feel like it's going on too long.
Yeah. And I wholeheartedly agree. And it just like becomes obvious right away that like Dot found a really good therapist.
Mm-hmm. And we love that.
She has just grown.
She's been in therapy for 100 years.
She's stepping in. Yeah, she's stepping in to say what's what. And she's like, you know what? You've been singing about forever a whole lot, and life is short.
Yeah. And this, there's a lot of general good advice, but the one that stands out to me that I referenced earlier already was,
I chose and my world was shaken, so what? The choice may have been mistaken, the choosing was not. You have to move on.
Right.
I think about that often, like wallowing in indecision is not better than making a wrong choice.
Stop worrying if your vision is true. Let others make that decision. They usually do.
Yeah.
Like, what a mantra. You're going to get judged no matter what.
And it's, especially true for art and trying to create something brand new. But really in anything you're doing, if you're focusing too much on what other people think, it's not helping you. It's not doing any favors for anybody to have that mentality.
Right.
I do go back and forth a little bit on Annalie Ashford's diction in this song. On the one hand, she closes to the second half of the diphthong on the eyes, which I don't love.
Yes.
But then she sings Concentrate on Now much more clearly than any other recording of this song. So I'm like, I got those words better. So I'm like, some spots she really nailed it, and others I would have another pass at.
I definitely took note of the eyes thing. And then I feel like on she's singing like A-H. And as choral singers, we have this conversation about the word God all the time, where even though you say God, there are ways to color it so that it implies, basically singing it like A-W instead. And it just, as with a few of the other things we've already talked about, it seems so blatant that I want to be there for that conversation where they're like, oh no, sing it straight God. And just like,
yeah, it's a little too bright for me. I would make it a little bit darker of a vowel, but yeah. Because it's, for people that are not that are not as familiar with this, it's like how in certain parts of the country, caught and caught rhyme or don't rhyme, because
Right.
some dialects have separated those out and others have merged them. And the thing with singing, especially with other people, is you have to agree on which version you're going to use and be consistent with it so it has the tone you want. And especially when she is singing with Jake, hers pops out a little bit more because she's much more on the brighter ah than he's a little bit more aw. So these are the things that Tony and I nerd out about.
Yeah, I love talking about vowels.
Stop worrying if your vision is new. Let others make that decision they usually do.
I appreciate that throughout the song, the accompaniment is very legato, but there's still constant motion with quarter notes to keep that pointillism feel. So it's kind of like we've fully melded those two together now, which is musically kind of a climax of the whole show in this song, which is a lot of fun.
And it's pushing you forward at the end of the day.
Mm-hmm.
Anything you do, let it come from you. Then it will be new. Give us more to see.
And then we have the finale, Sunday again. And we're starting with George reading his great-grandfather's words that are in the primer. And it's almost an incantation to bring up the arpeggios from the opening, as he says the same words that George had 100 years before.
They are your words, George. The words you uttered so often when you worked.
Order. Design.
And I love that each of those arpeggios is slightly different, and none of them have the bass note none of them have the root in the bass, so that you don't have a sense of being settled until you get to harmony, which was definitely intentional.
Yes, very smart. And it's like, I thought the dialogue itself, provided like a sense of resolution to the story. And so that it all comes together, like you said, in harmony for the end. And then you get the motive, those lush, ad-night chords that we love.
Yeah. So he's reading the words, and then he gets to one and he says, I cannot read this word. And that almost cements my theory that he's reading these things slowly because he's translating. But the problem with that is the French word for harmony is harmonie. So I don't think you'd have trouble translating that one. So it's more likely just a legibility issue in the primer. But that's okay. That's why I don't think I'm right. It's just an interesting theory I had.
I cannot read this word.
Harmony.
So much love in his words. Forever with his colors. How George looks.
So we're reprising, and I think there will be like a lot of like similar notes, but I of course want to ask you, what do you think about the ending? Because I think basically that the show should have ended the way that Act 1 ended, with the big note that kind of cuts off into silence and ushers in the applause. How do you feel about it?
I mean, musically that would be very satisfying, but I mean, kind of just narrowing it down and then ending on a white canvas, his favorite, so many possibilities, and then just the horn interval is also very beautiful. So I'm not mad about how it is. I probably wouldn't be mad about what you're saying as well. But I like that there's a different energy to kind of end more peacefully instead of triumphantly, because that kind of feels more appropriate to where he's come in his journey. It is to me.
I'm glad I asked.
And that's the show. So
Yeah.
this revival ran for a limited run of 61 performances at the newly reopened Hudson Theater, which is one of the oldest Broadway theaters, but had been out of commission for a very long time. So that's nice to have another one. I think that's the most recent new Broadway theater we've had. And the show was withdrawn from consideration for Tony nominations, so it does not have any. And the album was produced for Warner Music by Bart Miguel, something like that, with audio engineer Tyler Hartman. Who would you say is your standout performer on this album?
My standard performer is Penny Fuller. I think she delivered two of the most virtuosic vocal performances.
Very fair.
Who would you say?
I think I would still go with Annalie Ashford, just because really only she and Jake have a lot of material, and I think she's more successful overall, so I would go with her. But I really like a lot of the smaller performances that just don't have as much there because of the role.
Yeah.
What is your go-to track that you're most likely to listen to on its own?
Everybody Loves Louie.
Interesting.
And
okay.
I know. It's so real. It's so unique. It's full of relatable life lessons. And as I said before, I go to it when I'm feeling like Dot, when I'm feeling like George, and when I'm feeling like Louie. Because the truth is, there's no clear winner in a situation like that. And I bet Louie knows he's Louie, you know?
Yeah.
That's what's so interesting. So I do listen to that every once in a while. And it's a lesson ultimately about the things we can control and the things we can't. And I think that's where the message of this show is really encapsulated, even though it's an upbeat song.
I love that. I think I would still go with Move On. Just the encouraging energy in that song is infectious. And I especially grew to love it more listening to the Sondheim, etc. Live from Carnegie Hall album of Bernadette's, which is interesting to then, like, I got used to that so much that then it took adjusting to go back to listen to the real version, which is a duet and not a solo. So I got hung up on that for a while, but that's the song I'm most likely to listen to on its own. But there's just so many good ones. Let's do the scoring, shall we?
Sure. Like I said, there's a lot of irony here. I'm feeling very Yvonne and Jules, and this is everything is like, okay, you're taking a composer who is iconic, and this cast is just stellar, and it's really tough, but I have to have something to say on the podcast.
All right, well then let's say some things. For music, out of 15 points.
Composition, I said 12 points, and it's just about, I think everything is related to the kind of form stuff, and like especially the ending. Why not end with One More Big Sunday? And then I thought putting it together just a little repetitive. So most of it had to do with form, and I took off 3 points.
All right. I think I'm going to go with 15. There are so many things that are just incredibly well done that are rarely done well, like how integrated the storytelling is into the music, not just the lyrics. And even like the repetition in putting it together, I think is more thematic in how he has to keep repeating this thing that he hates over and over. And so even those kinds of things feel intentional and part of what he's going for. So is this the best score ever? Maybe not, but it's certainly not a whole lot that are better than this. So I'm going off the top. I'm feeling generous today.
All right.
For lyrics out of 15 points.
For lyrics out of 15 points, It's kind of a combination of Franz's accent and
Well, that's not the
things,
lyrics.
times where
I guess it kind of is, yeah.
I know, that's what I'm saying. It's the combination of that and times when I think someone should have known better, and maybe caught it in rehearsal or something. But I took off 2 points, mostly related to awkward syllabic stress. But once again, we're talking about a composer known for having some of the most clever, fun lyrics to ever be on the stage. And I understand that, but I said 13. What did you
Okay.
say?
I'm going to go with 14.5.
All right.
I had put it also to 15, but you're right. The Franz lyrics, written with the knowledge that it will be sung in an accent, does make it a foreseeable issue in the lyric writing that it would be tough to hear. So I'll take off just a little bit for that. For virtuosity, out of 15 points.
For virtuosity, I said 10, and I'm thinking the orchestration and the orchestra were stunning. Virtually no notes there. And a lot of it had to do with my overarching notes for George, as far as rushing and clipping, the belting that we talked about, and the treatment of vowels and R's that I talked about, open up my eyes that you talked about. And when you put it all together, I deducted 5 points. So I came out with 10. What
Okay.
did you say?
I'm going to go with 12. I think
Okay.
there are no permanent issues. It's not like, oh, this singer is bad. It's choices here and there that are issues, or a note here or there. But I think Penny Fuller is giving an amazing performance. All of the smaller characters are doing a great job. So I think I just took off the 3 points for the several small issues, but I don't really have any big issues overall with the album. The hardest thing is just separating out the fact that it's not Mandy Patinkin and Bernadette Peters. That's my main issue, and I'm like, I can't penalize them for that because no one else could be them.
Correct. And I'm surprised we haven't said it before now. As I thought about this in my head, I thought we would say that in the first 15 seconds. Like, well, it's not Bernadette and Mandy, and we've still got to like it.
Yeah, and
I don't know.
I mean, that's why, as much as I really like this album, it's not going to be the one I listen to. I'm going to go back to the OBC just because those performances are so ingrained in my head as the role. But this is definitely solid. For personality on the album, out of 15.
Personality, thank God I gave it a perfect score, because now I feel like an a-hole. But it was so well conveyed, and I did feel like a combination of the vocal performance, singing, and the kind of dialogue that was left in the album contributed to giving the character's personality. So I said 15.
Okay. I'm going to go with 13. There are a lot of times when George feels somewhat flat, especially in Act 1. And that's hard because that's, to some degree, the character is not showing his emotions. But I would like it to feel more like he's hiding his emotions rather than he has none. And sometimes with Jake, it just felt like there was not anything behind it. There are some parts that Annalie did not mine for the emotion that I would have expected. And then Robert Sean Leonard hits the notes, sounds good, but is not giving me a whole lot of the cockiness of Jules. He's giving a much more refined and kind of detached Jules, which is a choice, but I would like him to be a little bit more smarmy and punchable.
Yeah, we really want a villain.
Yeah.
I see that.
He's the best we can hope for a villain. And then now into storytelling, out of 15 points.
I gave it a 12, and I think it's mostly related to like the show that Sondheim structured. And it's kind of inherent in this type of show that it might be difficult to follow the story just listening to the album. And so I deducted a couple points there. And I'm thinking of anything that's mostly what it was related to.
Okay.
Is that just the story by its nature might make it difficult for a listener to follow start to finish.
Yeah. This has been a category that's been difficult to fully narrow down what it should be. Because I think this season I'm trying to view it more as, does it feel like you're going on a story journey? Not necessarily are you getting the entire show plot from the album. And to that, I think I'm going to go with 13 because I think most of it does feel like it's in furtherance of a narrative. And it's just there are a couple times where it's a really sharp pivot between tracks because the book scene that's in between does a lot. So that jarring nature is what's going to make me drop it down a couple points. But overall, I still think it's doing a pretty good job. For emotiveness out of 10 points.
10, baby. I thought it was so well emoted, and there were, those performances that just delivered and made the characters feel so real and organic. And this show feels very personal, as someone, I think Sondheim was a little bit older than us when he wrote it, but we're definitely moving into that phase of life where these things really come to the fore. You have more choice. You have to let some things go,
Yeah.
And
yeah, he would have been 53
and so
when
this really painted
opened
a
on
picture.
Broadway, which is not that much older than us anymore compared to how it used to be. Let's not think about that too much.
I know. What did you say?
I'm going to go with 9. I think, especially with this season, Come From Away that can make me tear up just listening to some of the songs out of context even. I think I'm not going to give it the full 10, but it really does explore the emotions of the characters so well. And on a full listen through, it makes me feel a lot of things as well. So very close to a 10. Actually, I'll even go 9.5 because it's not as good as Come From Away in that respect, but it's pretty damn good. For inventiveness out of 5 points.
I gave it a 4, and I guess it was pioneering for the time, but it's been done a lot in many versions since, and it really is. I think Stephen Sondheim's style is unique. What we've talked about, showing both sides of a coin that you don't usually see in stories that move linearly. He likes to say, okay, the story where a typical story would end, we're at intermission, and that feels very Sondheim. So it's highly innovative, but for this category, I took off 1 point.
Okay. I had put it down as a 3. I'm going to bump it up to a 3.5 after recognizing some of your points there. I think this is not the most groundbreaking. Sondheim is incredibly inventive, but still very much follows the form in a lot of the big ways of typical musical theater. And, the fact that it was based on a postcard of a painting that he saw is unique. But the revival here didn't really reinvent the wheel. It wasn't trying to. It was, it was a limited run, started as a gala at New York City Center. I think it was just, it's still, the show itself still has a lot of inventiveness in it, but this production did not further that more in the way that other revivals have really reimagined things and changed the concept. For clarity and usability out of 5 points.
I said 3, kind of I guess 1 point for our first gripe in the beginning. I just think the cut is blatantly wrong, in my opinion. And then there were a couple times where the singing was lost, and I didn't know if it was it was tough to tell whether it was technical or breathing, but it was in Everybody Loves Louie. And there's one time where she says, "Hello, George," and I know what it is and you know what it is, but for someone who was listening for the first time, it probably would be lost. And then another part where she goes like, "Louie," but it's almost like her head is turned away.
Hmm.
And like I said, we know what it is, but it's unclear to me. And so those two big things put together took off 2 points for a total of 3.
Okay. I'm going to go with 4. I think, I have all the same things that you have. They didn't bother me as much as it seems like they bothered you. The
I'm having a hard time over here, Alex.
like the incorrect cut between the opening and the first real song. It's only slightly different from where I think it should be. It's not like it's ridiculously different. And part of that too then is just going back to having the day off songs be separated into Gossip, Dog Song, and Day Off, but not separating out the Soldier Song and putting it in the right place in the order of the show. If you're going to have those tracks be separate, there's no reason not to pull out the Soldier Song the way they did in London. So, yeah, that's going to get me to 4. And then lastly, for Curb Appeal, out of 5 points, the album cover.
I said 3. I think there's what is there is very like Lady Gaga applause at the 2013 VMAs.
Very much that.
I think there was an opportunity to do something with dots, like across the board in any form. And then I think if you were going to use the paint, there's an opportunity to make it a little bit more like crisp and modern. Like I see in my head, like painted very thick and then photographed, and it would just look so vivid. So I put it right in the middle. I just think there's space to improve. And so 3 out of 5.
Okay. I'm going to go with 3.5 out of 5. I think it is a absolutely beautiful cover. However, the show is all about pointillism and you show smears of paint. Come on. That is just so incorrect for representing the show thematically and musically even. And yeah, I don't think and yes, okay, it's about an artist, but it's not giving you a ton of what's actually in the show. So yeah, I wish there was some sort of dot theme, not just smears of paint. But I do like the colors that they chose, so that's at least something.
Yeah.
So yeah, 3.5 for me. And that brings my score to 88, yours to 82. So our average is 85.
Yeah. There we go. I think we've cemented our spot in gay hell to give a Sondheim musical at 85.
Well, only 30 of those points are Sondheim. The rest are the album specifics itself. And I gave it 29.5 out of 30 points for the Sondheim parts. So I'm okay.
You're saved.
Yes. I mean, this has been so much fun, especially talking through a show like this with somebody like you who has the musical training to catch things that I either don't catch or don't know how to describe correctly. I appreciate having your perspective on all that.
And I appreciate your encyclopedic knowledge, and I think we make a great team.
Absolutely. Although I realized I said before that the London actor of George was David Evans and it's Daniel Evans, I realized. So I apologize for that. If Daniel's listening, which I'm sure he is. Well, Tony, if people want to hear more from you, stay in touch, is there a way that you would like them to do that?
Please reach out to the podcast and Alex will forward your information to me.
Perfect. Yes, you are famously not a social media person at all, so that is fair. However, the podcast is on Instagram at Little Things You Hear Together. You can follow there to know when new episodes are coming, or even better, follow the podcast on your podcatcher of choice. You can also email me questions, comments, concerns at littlethingsyouheartogether@gmail.com. Next week will be another album from this wonderful 2016 to 17 Broadway season, so check back for that. Thank you so much, Tony.
Thank you very much. I'll talk to you soon.